Welcome to the Sales Enablement Innovation Podcast, brought to you by the Sales Enablement Collective. Each episode, we sit down with sales enablement and revenue leaders from around the world and invite them to share their expertise and experience with the community. On this episode, we spoke to Nitin Kartik about his experience with sales enablement seen through the lens of product marketing. Hey Nitin, thanks for coming on to the show. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Daniel. I'm really looking forward and thanks for having me.
So before we dive into the questions and the podcast, could you introduce yourself for our listeners, give yourself a bit of background and sort of explain what's brought you to this point in your career?
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Nitin Kartik. I'm Director of Product Marketing at Carbyne. We are a New York-based public safety technology company. And the best way to understand my background, Daniel, is I have an MBA from the University of Chicago. I have a master's from Stanford University. Another fun fact, I've actually been featured on BBC TV as well as a subject matter expert. Do check out my LinkedIn. You'll see a video on that one. My experience spans many different industries, public safety, e-commerce, automotive, media, and others. I love doing both product marketing, which includes sales enablement, and we'll talk a little bit about the compare and contrast of product marketing and sales enablement. Some of the things that I've helped my organizations with is I've helped grow our revenue by almost 2 times on an annual basis. I have helped deliver record-breaking acquisition, improved 26% in spend efficiency. I've increased our partnerships. I've won trophies and many more. So really excited to share my insights and how all of us can take our sales enablement game to the next level, Daniel.
That's awesome. And that's an amazing CV and exactly the type of guest that we love to get on the podcast. So thanks again. I guess that the first question that sort of, especially coming from the product marketing side of things, is how do you sort of define sales enablement? What does sales enablement mean to you? Because once upon a time, product marketing and sales enablement maybe were even the same thing, and now they're sort of branches of each other. They work together. Sometimes they're separate. So how do you sort of view sales enablement in your role and in your experience?
Definitely. I think, the joke, Daniel, is if you ask 10 people who do sales enablement what sales enablement is, you'll probably get 11 different answers, okay? So, first is let's try to understand what we are talking about when we mean sales enablement. Ultimately, it's about helping our sellers grow revenue, right? Helping them meet their targets and ultimately the company's targets. This is a shared responsibility between the sales team as well as the marketing team, and product marketing plays an important role in that. I would say in smaller companies, the product marketing and sales enablement roles tend to be combined. In larger companies where there are more resources and more people, these can be bifurcated, especially when the product offerings are more complex. Then you need, people to create the content and then people to help the sellers be able to leverage that content exactly when and how they need it. So, I'd like to maybe compare and contrast how things work at smaller companies versus how things work at larger companies. Daniel, should we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly what I was going to go into. In your experience with sort of smaller companies and those sort of molded and mixed sort of product marketing enablement sort of roles, what's your sort of experience with how enablement looks like in those sort of, let's say, less mature or smaller sort of companies?
Yeah. In some ways, there are strong similarities. And in some ways, there are differences in the way sales enablement works at big and small companies. So let's talk maybe first about some of the similarities. In many cases, again, it's about helping the seller sell more. So in some ways, it's like the same challenges with more zeros, okay? You've got a big company, you got more zeros, after the numbers, and then smaller company, it's less. So in that sense, it's kind of a similar situation. Let's talk about maybe some of the differences. At large companies, sales enablement and product marketing are 2 entirely different teams, maybe even entirely different departments. Sometimes what I've seen is product marketing could be a centralized function that looks globally. Sales enablement, especially if an organization is present in maybe dozens of countries, sales enablement is how you localize that content for that geography. So whether it is for a certain country or even for specific products, how to talk about them. Larger companies, as we discussed, Daniel, have more resources. And so you're able to have that FaceTime with the sellers to help coach them, to help train them, to help arm them with the right information that product marketing creates. At large companies also, there are some disadvantages to having a dedicated sales enablement team. One of them is the feedback feedback should be bi-directional, right? Going outbound to the sellers and also inbound coming from the sellers into the organization, especially the product team. So one of the challenges I've seen in larger organizations is when you have, dedicated teams, separate teams, they sometimes can make silos. And so the feedback that the sellers get in the real world sometimes doesn't make it all the way back to the product team, right? So then we may not be able to iterate and create the next version of the product that meets some of the gaps and some of the challenges that our customers are facing. So that's a look quickly in the large organizations. In small organizations, everyone is wearing like 100 different hats. And so typically sales enablement is a function of product marketing. So, for example, at my organization, I had a product marketing and, that includes sales enablement. Typically, there are less resources and more limited bandwidth. So that can sometimes be a challenge because then we have to prioritize, right? If we have a lot of different products, we have to see where we want to invest our limited bandwidth in order to really move the needle. And sometimes, that can shortchange some of the sellers, right? Some of the sellers are not happy. Hey, what about, my customer? What about my product? So those can be some of the challenges. What I would also say is, since there are fewer layers in a smaller organization going all the way from, let's say, engineering, product marketing, sales enablement to the sellers, they may be collapsed, some of these, there is more free-flowing information. And so the messaging, that is coming out from product and product marketing is maybe more directly related to the sellers, right? So they understand, oh, okay, so I see what, a product does and this is how I should talk about it. And conversely, Daniel, the bi-directional message from the sellers coming in, it tends to be a little bit improved in smaller companies, again, because there are fewer layers. Many times product managers are able to talk directly with the sellers and get the information firsthand so that we can iterate and we can update our products. So hopefully, Daniel, that gives a quick idea as to large companies, small companies, how sales enablement, product marketing, all of these play together.
That's really interesting. And it sort of brings me to thinking, if one of our listeners is, say, in an enablement team that's a sort of separate department, and you sort of touched on this a little bit, and the feedback doesn't get to sort of product marketing teams, back to the product teams. For you as a product in product marketing, and from that sort of side, when you're in those sort of large organizations, there's more layers. What sort of feedback are you looking, like how should that feedback look when it comes from an enablement team? I'm thinking if someone's in enablement and they're listening to this podcast and they're thinking, okay, if this is a challenge, I want to be able to provide my product marketing team and my product teams with as much feedback as possible. What do you sort of look like? What does that sort of bi-directional communication look like? And so what are you looking for from enablement teams from a sort of product marketing standpoint?
Yeah, it's a couple of things. So one, I would say from a competitive intelligence perspective, right? The sellers are the feet on the street, right? They're talking to customers every day. And sometimes when we find that our products are not winning as well as we would like against our competitors, it can be a challenge, to find why are we not winning? Is it like a pricing issue? Is it like we're lacking some features? Is it maybe we're not like communicating? Sometimes, Daniel, we've been in situations where we've had customers go with a competitor, and when we ask them later on, they say that, oh, they had this feature or, they had this capability. And we're like, we had that. And, we just didn't do a good job of like explaining that. So sometimes it can be a bit of an opaque piece of glass that you're trying to look through. So what I would look for in, let's say, better sales enablement collaboration is to get more win-loss information, right? Why exactly are we losing the deal? And use that to, if it is a messaging issue, our messaging, let's say our product sheets and our marketing videos and our website, everything that the customers see, we should really hone in on that message. The other challenge that we see is in today's day and age, Daniel, we have like a data deluge, right? There's like so much data, so much information. Less is more, okay? And so if there are like 10 points we want to make with a customer, maybe they're only paying attention to like the first 5 points. So if we know that compared to our competitors, this is the killer thing that will help sell our product, we want to move that as high as possible. So these are some of the things that, we would look for to get back from the seller so that we can improve our product and our messaging.
That's really interesting. And that's what brings me to my next point is, do you have, I guess, examples or a situation where you have sort of been able to incorporate that seller feedback when you've gotten it in the way you wanted, it's come back, everything's flowing smoothly, and that sort of seller feedback has helped the sort of enablement team and the product marketing team sort of bring it up to the next level?
Yeah. There are many examples. I'll pick one, Daniel. So one situation that we find, for example, in my industry, in public safety, one of the companies I've been with is called Rapid SOS. And what we found is we were a leading technology provider in terms of what we were offering. And we were pushing that message, technology innovator, technology. And for various reasons, we weren't winning as many customers as we wanted. And what we found from the feedback from the sellers is, guys, our customers, they are kind of tech averse, okay? They actually get intimidated by technology. So all this thing, we do this, the latest, greatest technology, gee whiz, it's like kind of backfiring. Okay, so that was actually good feedback. So what we did is we changed our messaging to talk not so much about, we got this, we got that, but it's like, you don't have to worry. You may be inundated with vendors trying to pitch, the latest and greatest. We are the provider who can help you overcome your challenges with technology, right? So it's like changing the messaging, and we found that dramatically increased the uptake that we had with some of our users. And so that's, one example. But there are many examples where when you have that free-flowing feedback that goes both ways from the sellers, it's like magic. Otherwise sometimes it can feel like pushing on a string, but now it's like, the string is taut and, things are moving. So yeah, really, really magic happens, Daniel.
I really like that, and it just shows the power of sometimes it's something as simple as that the customer, it's just a change of messaging is all it takes to sort of bring something up. And that sort of brings me to my next point, was I wanted to ask you about sort of ideal customer profiles and using those for sales enablement. A lot of the times reps can sometimes have those sort of questions about, are they targeting the right people? Maybe the ICP sort of materials that have come back haven't been good enough. So how do you make sure that sort of ideal customer profile is airtight rather, all the way from sort of the product and product marketing team and it's getting through to the sellers in order to sort of make that enablement as effective as it can be?
Yeah, this is another important thing. It's like if you use all your firepower, but you're like pointing in the wrong direction, it's like useless sometimes, and it can be very frustrating. I've been burnt by this many times. So maybe for this one, Daniel, I'll tell you about a situation where we had a subscription business and we were offering a service with a free trial. And we were getting a lot of customers to take the free trial, but what we found is many of them were dropping off. Like that conversion from a free trial to a paying customer, it was like declining. And we wanted to see how we can help our sellers address that. And so for that, what we had to do is look back up in the funnel and understand the people that we're targeting, right? Are we even targeting the right people? Like how should we be targeting? What is the ideal customer for this product? And from our research, we found, Daniel, that there were actually two things that we had to do. We were only doing one. One is we had to find customers who had a strong need for our product. We were doing that. And, that's why all the free trials were coming in. The second is we had to do some qualification in terms of, like, do they have the budget to actually pay for the subscription for this product, right? Not that they take the free trial and then they cancel. So when we realized that we were attracting one half of the funnel, the people who liked and had a need for the product, we were not attracting, or we were not qualifying the second side, which is, doing that budget qualification. When we updated our parameters to include both the need for the product and the budget, we found that first we had a reduction in the number of people who were taking our product, but we also were able to modify our initial offering where instead of offering a free period, we offered a deeply discounted onboarding, right? So you wouldn't get it for free. You would get it heavily discounted. So customers getting a great deal regardless. But the fact that they have to pay something at least is a way to qualify. Do you have the budget? Do you intend to actually pay for the service? And like I said, we had two dynamics playing out. One is the total people taking the initial offer went down as expected, right? You ask people to pay something, it's going to go down. But we had a 31% improvement in the retention, right? And that's ultimately what we want. So this was a way that by understanding our ideal customer profile and using that in our sales enablement, we were able to dramatically increase the amount of revenue that we were making through the improved retention with our customers.
That makes a lot of sense. And I guess one of the things I'm curious about on that is, what does the conversation then look like when you find out, like, the qualification hasn't been right, the sellers aren't qualifying the leads properly, something's getting lost in translation at some point? What does those sort of conversations look like with the enablement teams, with the sellers, with the product marketing teams, to sort of get to the bottom of it? Was it sort of how much was seller feedback? Was it enablement teams sort of reporting back, product marketing saying, hey, something's not right here? Sort of, what does that sort of conversation look like, so of you can sort of get to the bottom of what that qualification issue was and going from there?
Yeah, sometimes it is difficult to really get to the root of what is happening. You know, you'll see symptoms. So for example, you'll see a lot of churn in the sales team, right? Like they're not able to hit their numbers, and, you know, like people are leaving, they're like frustrated. So you'll see some of that happening. You'll see us losing to our competitors, where many times if our messaging, if we're targeting kind of the wrong type of customer, they may just prefer to go with other companies' products when they actually end up paying. So these are kind of the telltale signs that you will see up front. What you then have to do, Daniel, is to go back one level, right? So then you have to say, okay, have those kind of internal interviews with your sales team to find out, okay, so why is the customer not like staying, right? Why are we losing some of this to the competition? They'll give you feedback. Now, sometimes the feedback can be a bit of a red herring. So you have to see, are you getting the same feedback from multiple sellers, right? If it's a pattern, then you're like, okay, maybe there's something in our product, or maybe in the way we're targeting our ideal customer profile, that we have to pursue. So then we say, okay, there's a pattern, there's something that's maybe wrong in our ideal customer profile. Then you have to talk with the research folks to see, hey guys, we're seeing some of these signals from the market. Can we update our ideal customer profile? Then they look more into it and they're like, okay, maybe we were identifying this half, but not that half, right? Then they fill that out. Then you have to go back in the other direction, right? Then it's like, okay, hey, we have new research. We have new ideal customer profiles. This is the kind of customer we want to target. Guys, go get it. And when, you know, that's where the bi-directional communication comes in. When that thing happens, you go full circle, and, you know, what was like frustrating and took forever is now becoming so much smoother. And it's quite a miracle to actually see that happening.
I really like that. And it's, like you said, finding that sort of the keys and the signals that are sort of let you then explore further is really important. One thing I'm wondering is on the podcast, we have so many conversations about sort of the metrics that enablement people are using sort of to define success. You know, proving the return on investment on enablement programs is also always a big thing. From your perspective, how do you, I guess, measure the success of enablement in terms of, is it just, you know, okay, you know, you had that 31% increase, for example, is that sort of where you're measuring the success when you see that down the line? Or is there content usage, sort of what sort of numbers and statistics are you sort of looking at from your perspective to make sure that the enablement efforts that you're putting in are actually on track?
Yeah, you mentioned a very important point, Daniel, which is the actual usage metrics. So we can look at metrics in two phases, right? One is kind of more long-term metrics, and one is more kind of daily tracking metrics, right? Because long-term metrics are good, but if it takes you, you know, weeks or months to get those, like, it may be too late to make any changes, right? So you do need some intermediate, like, daily metrics. So the the usage metrics that you alluded to, those are great, like daily or more regular metrics that you can track. So you're putting out material. In the olden days, people will, put out like PDFs, or even, they would print out sheets at trade shows and, send all this material out. Now, a lot of that is going digital, right? Depending on your customer, depending on your industry, you may be able to use tracking tools where you send out materials and you can see, like DocSend and some of these tools, you can see who's engaging with it. If it's, let's say, a multi-page document, which pages do they spend more time? You can see all of that information. So you want a system that is able to aggregate that and create like a dashboard and give you that almost on a daily basis if you can. So that is kind of the daily metrics that you want to track, usage metrics. The long-term metrics that you want to track are things like the win rates against your competitors, because it's fine, if they're engaging with your content, but ultimately if they're going with your competitor, like, is that really helping? In fact, sometimes, Daniel, we've made the mistake where we've provided such amazing content. It's educated them about kind of the industry and all of that. And they're like, thank you, guys. I'm going to go with this other company. And we're like, oh, my God, we just shot ourselves in the foot. So you want to be careful, right, about the content that you put out and not put too much stock in the usage metrics. Ultimately, it has to drive things like your win rates, and it even has to drive the time to close. It's okay, if your content engagement is great. It's okay if your win rate is also amazing, but if it's taking you forever to close these deals, maybe that's a bit of a challenge. You want to see what key killer information can you provide so that they're like, got it. That's it. I'm buying this product, right? So reducing the time to sale, the time to closed one, that is another important metric. So I think to summarize, the intermediate metrics, the usage metrics are key for that. Try to get a daily dashboard if you can, and always pivot based on what you're seeing there. The ultimate long-term metrics that you want to focus on, win rates and time to close. I would say those are the two important ones.
That makes a lot of sense, and it definitely echoes with the conversations that sort of we've had in the podcast as well. So it's cool to get the affirmation that people are on the same track. That's always nice to see as well. One thing I'm wondering is, I guess, in terms of like the challenges that you sort of face, is there any that are sort of consistent from company to company, that like whether it's a smaller company that you're at, a larger organization, what are some of those enablement challenges that you just kind of seem to run into over and over and have to address regardless of sort of where you are? Is there anything, or is it the landscape so varied that it's a different challenge every time? Or sort of how do you, I guess, when it comes to challenges, are you seeing the sort of common threads across companies and that?
Yeah, there are some common threads. So one is sometimes when there are different teams handling these various functions, there can be, what I call like tribal warfare, where, there's a bit of a turf battle. The sales enablement team sometimes feels that, maybe it's all the seller's fault. They're not like getting the message out. The sellers feel that, the sales enablement is not like training us properly. And, that's kind of where we're losing. The product team may feel that, man, our products are like kick butt, but, like our sales enablement is not able to like message it. So there's like finger pointing. So that's, I think, one common challenge that I've seen at organizations, big and small. I think this tends to happen. The solution that I've found that works well there is to take everyone's perspective, validate their perspective, right? If, let's say, we disagree, guys, we think the problem is here. No, we think the problem is here. Listen, hear them out, take their perspective, and whenever you have a consensus, okay, here's how we're going to change things, okay, so that we're going to get better. Try to get the fingerprints of as many teams as you can, okay? If sellers are saying something, take their fingerprints in. Okay, you know what? We're going to take that feedback. We're going to do it this way. If product is yelling, about something else, okay, take some feedback from them, right? And so when you have the final package, you have everybody's fingerprints on it. And then in the end, everyone is shooting in the same direction, right? It's not like a circular firing squad where everyone's like shooting at each other. You're all kind of on the same boat. You're bailing water out. And then, Daniel, what I found is something miraculous happens. When, let's say, sales enablement is having a challenge, the sellers will come in, hey, you know what? I actually can solve that. Let me do it this way. Product may come in and solve it. Hey, you know what? Actually, let's do it this way. So it's really nice. When you like validate other people's perspectives, when you take all of their fingerprints into the final consensus, everyone is rowing in the same direction. And that's when, things are working well. So that's the one thing that I would, definitely leave the audience with is when you feel like everyone's finger pointing at you, avoid the reflex to like defend yourself and kind of get into that argument, and that's not productive. Validate, take their input, and use that to build consensus.
That's really cool. And I think the cross-functional collaboration is such an important piece, sort of regardless of what role. So sort of being able to bring everyone in is really nice. I'm sort of keeping one eye on the time at the moment. So I want to ask you sort of before we wrap up, in terms of like looking at your entire career and everything you've done regarding enablement, what do you sort of see as do you have like sort of a greatest success or greatest case study where you were really sort of happy with the outcome, or a particular, I guess, a standout enablement moment that you sort of like to look back on fondly?
Yeah, probably I would say, if I had to pick one, we had a situation, Daniel, where we were trying to meet our numbers and our sellers were under extreme high pressure. Okay, they were looking like they were not able to hit our numbers. We had a campaign that we were trying to run that had the potential to be able to meet our numbers. But some of the tooling that we were using for that campaign internally, our tech stack, was not able to keep up. And, we were at a quandary, right? This thing had the potential to make our numbers for our sellers, but we had a problem with the tooling. So because I had good relationships with a lot of the different teams, I was able to work with them to build a homegrown tool. While these external tools were falling short, we built a homegrown tool. I rolled my sleeves up and, we got into the details. And ultimately, long story short, Daniel, we were able to beef up our tooling using homegrown tools. We were able to launch and we were able to hit our numbers. And for that, our chief marketing officer actually awarded me the Imagine and Invent Before They Ask award. And that was to recognize me and the team. We worked as a team to get this done. So probably I would say that's maybe one of the things that I'm really proud of working with everyone, getting a solution, and ultimately hitting our numbers.
That's awesome. And I love the way every time all the successes, they always come back to the sort of collaboration and working together and understanding each other. I think you really stressed that throughout the episode, which was really cool to sort of see the encapsulation of that to come through. I think we probably have to wrap it up there, unfortunately, but I just want to say thank you so much for coming on to the show and sharing your insights with me and with the community. I really enjoyed chatting. I'm 100% sure everyone's going to enjoy listening or watching the episode. So just thank you for taking the time. It's really appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you, Daniel. You're an amazing host. And folks, if you want to meet up with me, just hook me up on LinkedIn and I'll be glad to chat, and let's make it happen together.
Thanks for tuning in to the Sales Enablement Innovation Podcast. Be sure to follow us on your podcast platform of choice so you don't miss a thing. And if you're hungry for more sales enablement content, visit our website, salesenablementcollective.com, for articles, events, and an easy way to join our Slack community, home to thousands of your sales enablement peers.